Where do the Nuggets fit in the Western Conference title window conversation? Plus,
number one.
Number one. I see. I was like, I thought you were telling me to hold on. Also, what do we learn from Adam Silver's press conference? And a look around odds and ends from Summer League. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can join the show and join Miroslav and Joe and Carlos and Dominique and Tyler and Jonathan and all sorts of good folks in the chat, hanging out with us, adding in their comments. If you listen to the show, you know that we're always responding, so check it out. Go to YouTube, subscribe, like, turn on notifications, and you can join the show when we go live. So, glad to have you with us on a Wednesday as we continue to, I feel recovered from Summer League. I feel much better than I did yesterday. It's not so much that I didn't do anything out of pocket in Vegas because I'm 40 and that goes badly for me now. But there's just like a travel and Vegas kind of hangover. I will say that my clock was very messed up. So like last night I was like, I have to go to bed at like 11 Mountain to try and reacclimate as opposed to like 4 in the morning because it gets tough when you have kids and trying to figure that out. Adam Mars, how are you?
I'm great. Apparently I look hungover though, so I don't know. I thought I looked great this morning. I was just looking in the mirror. I was like, man, look at me shining over here. And everyone's like, you look like you're just got out.
You look like trash. Are you okay, man? Yeah.
Woo.
David says Matt's been 40 for the last 3 years. Not wrong. Not wrong, really. I would say, let's see, it's 2012 and 2016 was 6 years ago. About 6 years I felt 40. That's about how long that's it. And oh boy, Hurricane is back in the comments and we're bumping. On today's show, we're going to talk about, Adam and I were bandying about ideas and he was like, hey, do you want to talk about kind of the teams in the West and go through them? And I was like, what if we did like a window conversation? Because that's like always an interesting one of like, who is the window open for? Like really open. And let's look at it just from a conference perspective. We're going to talk about, I have a list of the teams that are in contention to win the Western Conference in the next 5 years. So what are their chances of winning a Western Conference title in the next 5 seasons? And we'll find out where the Nuggets land on that list. We'll talk about the other teams in that list and how they go about. We'll get all those types of things. In the third segment, Adam Silver had a press conference yesterday, talked about some things in terms of the league and how that's working. We got some rule changes. There's reports on the play-in tournament, all that and more. We'll talk about that in the final segment, as well as Adam and I kind of have some odds and ends of stuff we saw at Summer League from the other teams that we'll kind of get to as we await Game 3 of the Nuggets Summer League performance. So, let's go ahead and get to the window conversation. So, the interesting question here actually from Hurricane, in between his extremely... his comments make me extremely...
Make sure you get the right one. Yeah, pull up the right one.
Yeah. How many teams in a conference can realistically have an open window? I think we're in a real. I was about this morning because I think we're in a really strong era of parity. But also, the caveat to that is the Warriors beat the Nuggets in 5. They beat the Grizzlies in 6. And they beat the Mavericks in 5. And the Celtics in 6. They didn't go 7 with any of those teams. And really, like, Memphis was like a weird... They had that game in Memphis where they lost by like 50 or whatever. Quite honestly, that series is pretty much over because Ja went down. So they had a pretty dominant run. And yet I still feel, Adam, like the Western Conference window over the next 5 years at least, and obviously with the caveat of course, it's wide open over the next 5 years. So many things can happen. But even if we just look at the teams right now, I think that there's a pretty like wide amount of teams that can win a title. I actually have 8 to go through with you today.
What's funny, so there's 15 teams in a conference. 8 that you consider to have a window where, like, if they made, some are obviously more surprising than others, but that if they made the finals, you wouldn't be like, impossible. I'm guessing, by the way, the Sacramento Kings not on the list, and they had somebody put down $10,000 on them in Vegas. We already have our big futures bet of the year in Vegas. So just to show you, I will say I was listening to Ryan Russillo's pod from yesterday or the day before. The topic was, is this the best bad teams have ever been? And I kind of like that point. Like, the bad teams in the league, minus 2 or 3, there's still 2 or 3 like real true basement dwellers. But like the Sacramento Kings are good. I don't think they're a playoff team, but they're good. And so I think that this is sort of an era, to your point about the parity, there's just a lot of talent in the league, and that makes for more contenders at this point than ever before.
Yeah, I will say I think probably by the end of the season we'll have a lot more tanking teams just because Victor Wembanyama is so good. I think that there'll be like a lot of teams that are like, we should pivot in that direction. But I think that the quality of talent right now is really high. I just think it's exceptionally high. You can be down on 1 or 2 teams, but overall, yeah, I mean, I think we saw this kind of last year, honestly. And I think the play-in tournament helps us somewhat just because there's less of an incentive to be like, let's stay real low. The odds changes and those type of things.
But I think, but your point about Victor W is funny because this last year you had Paolo, you had Chet, you had Jabari. If you got the 3rd pick, I don't think it was the end of the world. Like you're like, okay, we're gonna get a good player. But Victor is the guy that is so clearly the number 1 guy that I do think we might see more aggressive tanking at the end. Like, was it the Thunder who kind of like put themselves out? Their odds dropped by like 2% or something. And it's like, well, that's not that big of a deal. This year it's going to be like, no, 2% for Victor. We're doing whatever it takes to be able to get that guy. And I think we're going to see. It might be a hilarious storyline. We might see some ultra tanking this year.
I don't know if they're going to be bad enough for it. Depends on how Presti evaluates Chet. If he's like, nope, this is the guy, let's go forward. But if the Thunder decide that they are not good enough and they decide to tank out and they wind up with the 1, if it's Victor and Chet, good with Shea, good God. But that's obviously a year away. Let's go ahead and break this down into Adam is off for a second.
I'm back.
And you're back. So I want to run through before we take a break. I've got 8 teams. Let's try and get through 4 of them real quickly. Number 8 for me is the New Orleans Pelicans, and the only reason I have them on this list is because of Zion Williamson. He is such a singular offensive truck force. I didn't want to leave them off of this list because if you were like, the Pelicans won the Western Conference title and made the finals in 2024, I'd be like, oh, so like Zion just became Mjolnir and just destroyed everything. It's still hard for me to envision that working out given the market, how that typically goes for them, Zion's injury history. I'm not high on Brandon Ingram. I like the rookies a lot, but still I have some concerns. So like they are the absolute last team on this list. They are the team I'd be most surprised at. But I will say, like, I have the Pelicans on here and I don't have the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Oh, wow. Man, I probably would have flipped that. I think both, like for me, you just said 2024 for the Pelicans, and that seems more realistic to me that they could be. I liked what Hurricane just said, that there's more teams he could see pulling off a first-round upset, but fewer that can make it to the finals. And I think that's right. And I think the Pelicans are probably in that group where would they be like the Dallas Mavericks of this year where nobody really picked them to go to the conference finals, but they end up doing it. I could see that, but winning all the series – I would have a hard time. I will say I don't put it all on Zion. The way, you just kind of said Zion, I think it's because you're already factoring in what they've already done. But I think Willie Green's a great coach who I would expect to get even better this year. So you talk about having a great young coach that got a team last year to buy in, even when it didn't start that way. That team didn't start the season totally bought in, but by the end of it, they were getting the most out of themselves. This will be his biggest tasks. I always like there's no better spot for a young new coach to be in than young team overachieves with no problems, like no ego problems. You bring back in Zion and then you try to integrate him into Ingram, who just led the team to a great season. And like those, it's a real challenge that we don't know if Willie Green's good at that part. And that's a big part of basketball. But I'm excited to see him try it out. I wouldn't have him as a contender, but I do think they're very good.
Minnesota, I just simply can't get there with the combination. I've supported the move and think that I've actually been like, I understand why Minnesota did this. I cannot see them winning. I just cannot see them winning the West with this configuration. I just can't. If you told me that they traded D'Lo for like Chris Paul, even at age like 39, maybe. But it would take to me this construction is not going to get there. Zion is such a singular force. I would put Zion's impact on a series as higher than like Towns's, even as much as I like Towns's game. And so for me, I'm not willing to put Minnesota on the list. Number 7 for me, however, and you're gonna be really shocked at this. 7 for me is the Dallas Mavericks. I have the Mavericks 7th on this list. Look, Luka's awesome. He really is. He's awesome. I don't see it. I know they made the Western Conference
Why
Finals
are they a
this
contender?
time. Because I think because I have enough respect for Luka, and it's like the path for them getting there is not incomprehensible for me. It's like, I mean, they made the Western Conference Finals last year, right? Like they were 4 wins away or 3 wins away or whatever from the Western Conference Finals or from the finals. So like I need to have some level of respect for that accomplishment. I can't put them any higher. And I think most people would have them like top 3 because of the amount of faith they have in Luka. But I don't love the supporting cast. I think they probably get a little bit worse next year, even though I like the Christian Wood move. And moves like losing Brunson for nothing those are really devastating things when you're trying to build a contender.
I mean, I'm shocked you're giving Luka that much respect because again, I put him in the Zion category of like, could he lead the team to win? And by the way, the Pelicans are better around Zion. I'm not saying Zion's better than Luka. I'm just saying the impact he's going to make makes them like an upset threat. But to make it to the finals, like I just don't see it. They got worse, and the West got better. To me, that seems a little off. So I do not think they're contenders.
That's interesting that I thought you would have them much higher, but instead you have them much lower. That's interesting.
Their talent.
Luka and pieces. That's it. It's very much a low.
They're like just average pieces. They fit.
Yeah,
him,
it's like a LeBron 06, a LeBron 07.
But he's not going through Ray Allen's Milwaukee and all these like sub teams. They would have to go through like some juggernauts.
Yeah, that's true. Which is why I have them so low. Number 6 before we get
by the way, even with Minnesota, we're not quite at the threshold for me yet of contender.
Wow, you think that none of these teams are going to win a Western Conference title in the next 5 years?
I would feel really comfortable with saying they're not going to win.
Okay.
If there's a crazy trade we don't foresee,
for sure.
So the Mavericks are going to end up trading for Kevin Durant at the deadline. They're like, you didn't think they could win. I'm like, hey, that's a completely different team now. Hold on.
So I was watching Zero Dark 30 last night, and there's a scene where Gandolfini's CIA director is like, I just want to know, is it him or is it not? And the guy's like, we don't talk in certainties. We talk in probabilities. And he's like, you're all feckless. And like, that's how I feel. But this is how I always am, where I'm just like, I don't know. Like like I can see it. So I'm going to put him in. I'm going to say that the window is open. Number 6 is still the Los Angeles Lakers. I refuse to take a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. No, I'll take it back. I refuse to take a team with LeBron James and put them off the list. Like as long as LeBron James is on the team, I think they have a shot at winning the title. This is not like, well, they can always trade for Kyrie or whatever else. It's just like, look, LeBron is still amazing. He's still incredible. He still plays at an MVP level. Injuries 2 of the last 3 seasons, obviously, like big concern. All sorts of issues. I hate the roster. All these types of things. But LeBron deserves to be on that list. Like that's how great LeBron James is.
What's crazy is with Luka, there's the supporting cast is below a threshold. Luka's good enough, but the supporting cast is below. With the Lakers, they have an equally terrible supporting cast, but they also have Anthony Davis. So yeah, it's like if you just gave Luka Anthony Davis, I would have them contenders. But that's basically what you're doing: LeBron, Anthony Davis, and bad pieces. And I'm with you. It's still a fringe contender.
Let's take a break.
Over the top 5 rolled over to the other side.
Yeah, let's take a break and we'll go through the top 5 when we come back here on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I need to tell you about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain store to keep all the parts that you need or the brands that you want. You're going to deal with a bunch of questions you don't want to deal with. You're going to deal with a bunch of hassles getting to the store and dealing with what they have in stock, trying to get somebody that's available because they're always on the phone too. That's a problem. Don't deal with that. You've got access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. They do not price tier for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Matt Moore, that Amara is going through which teams have a title window open to win the West over the next 5 seasons. Adam, my number 5 team is the Phoenix Suns. So I debated leaving them off entirely. And so, the fact that they had COVID and
Yeah.
that's a big reason why I think they got bounced was why I was like, look, I need to put them back on. Like I need to have some respect on for what they've accomplished. Chris is another year older. Chris has avoided major injury 2 years in a row. They're likely to lose Ayton. They may lose Ayton and get nothing in return.
Woo, that didn't all fair for sure.
Yeah. They re-signed Bismack Biyombo. Their centers are going to be Bismack Biyombo and Dario Saric. Devin has really proven that he's like that top level guy, but Devin's also not like every single game he's an unstoppable force. It's like a lot of games he's an unstoppable force, and some games he's just pretty good. So like Jay Crowder is obviously like Jay Crowder's kind of an asset that tends to have high volatility year by year. We'll see what happens with Bridges. Like that's another thing I think that you have to keep in mind on. If you ask me, the caveat here is obviously the KD thing, right? I have to factor in the odds of KD going to Phoenix, which I still think are the highest, and then the odds of that team winning a title. If I multiply my expected percentage of those odds by each other, I still come out with a low enough number to get them to number 5 here.
It's interesting. When you do these types of rankings, it's hard to project what might happen. For example, like the Lakers might trade for some, make a trade that makes them better. With Phoenix, though, you do have to factor it in because they're almost certainly going to be different. We just don't know. Like you said, could be for nothing, could be for something great, could be KD. I mean, honestly, what do you put the odds that KD winds up in Phoenix? I kind of feel like they're pretty high.
40% is the number I would give.
I mean, that's pretty high. 40% is pretty high.
Yes, of all outcomes. That's not if he's traded. That's of all outcomes, including he goes back to the Nets. Right. It's 40% that he goes to Phoenix. I think it's 40 to 45%, honestly.
So, like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Chris Paul,
pretty good.
It's pretty good. I mean, they have some holes, but it's pretty good. So,
but Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving.
I know.
So
it is a little. Yeah, I will say Kyrie and James Harden more volatile in my opinion than Devin Booker, Chris Paul.
Yeah.
But your point still stands. And by the way, you could even do this in Golden State. Like he went to Golden State, which is arguably the greatest culture of the last 20 years. Outside maybe the 2004 Pistons are the last team to have had such a great culture. Maybe 2013 or 14 Spurs. But outside of those teams, the Warriors seem to be at a place where most people go to be content, and he was not content long term. So who knows?
Yeah, and I think you also have to factor in like the Rockets very well beat them in 2018 if Chris doesn't, strain his hamstring. So it's like that team was amazing. Like the 2017 team is probably outside of Bulls 96, it's probably the best team I've ever seen. And it may be the best. Like that 2017 team. I went back and was looking at it the other day and like watching some tape and I was just like, "Oh my god." Like that Warriors team was insane in 2017. But by 2018 it started to drag a little bit. And it's hard like guys, it catches up with you how quickly guys age out. And there are some holes on the roster.
That Phoenix team with KD would be, in my opinion, probably more similar to Brooklyn than Golden State. Meaning they're not like a can't fail team.
Yeah.
They're more of a like, they're really good and they're probably going to be hard, but there might be a solve that makes them uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And who knows how they overcome that discomfort.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, like, well, what if they get KD? Will they be the title favorites? Yes, they will. Like the Phoenix Suns will be like minus 300 or minus like plus 200.
In the deal?
Yeah, even then, like
I agree.
KD, Book, and CP3 is enough with like Crowder and Bismack. Like that's enough to get you home. So, like the window is there. They're top 5, but they're not the highest I have on my list. Number 4 is the Memphis Grizzlies. So. I think this Grizzlies team probably takes a step back this season. Jaron's going to be out for 6 months. And
makes a big difference.
Ja, there's going to be an adjustment on Ja and how teams play him. The playoffs kind of showed some of that. I expect Bane to be consistently great, but Dillon Brooks will be back, and he's real volatile. They lost some depth. Kyle Anderson's a big loss for them. DeAnthony Melton's a big loss for them. Like they lost some key pieces. However, they still have more than enough to make a trade in a year, 2 years, 3 years for a major adjustment. Like, if it's Ja and Bradley Beal, that's like the ideal spot to me for Beal, where Beal doesn't have to be the guy. Beal's a solid number 2, and you have this dynamic, explosive guy at number 1. That to me is like a pretty perfect slot for him.
Yeah.
Jaron Jackson actually, even with all his fouls, really impressed me with his play this year. Not only defensively,
he's honestly, he might be the most important player on that roster when you factor
Yeah.
in they have Ja replacements. Not guys as good, but I'm just saying they have guys that can do that. They don't for Jaron.
Yeah, keeping Tyus, I thought was a smart move. I heard they were going to do that, so I'm not surprised that they decided to keep Tyus. I have a lot of faith in Ja, and I honestly have a lot more faith in Taylor Jenkins and Zach Kleiman and Tayshaun Prince in the front office than I do in Dallas's coaching and front office combination. Like, that to me is the difference. Like, if you ask me who's better, Luka or Ja, it's Luka. But if you ask me who's better, Luka, Jenkins, and the Grizzlies front office, or Luka, Kidd, and the Mavericks front office, I'll take the Grizzlies. So that's why I think the Grizzlies I can now. Here's what's interesting with the Grizzlies. I think they have the fourth best chance to win a Western Conference title in the next 5 years. I think they have a much worse chance than Dallas and a lot of these teams of winning the title. I think they can win the West, but not get through whoever they face in the East. That's my kind of opinion. Number 3 is your Denver Nuggets. Sorry, buddy. I get it. I get why you're making the faces at me, and I like it, but I can't. The two teams ahead of them, I think, deserve a touch more. Not respect, because I think I respect them all the same, but consideration for the window. And you've got the injury concerns. We don't know what Jamal's going to look like. They're capped out. Right, like they're even if this configuration works.
Add salary. They're not a hard cap.
True, but they're gonna have to figure out. They're gonna have to work within very narrow margins, and they did it this year, which is a huge credit to Calvin Booth.
I actually think that I don't know that the margins are that thin for them. I don't expect it to happen, but I do think there are ways that they could end up adding like another very good player to the roster if one was available. You have the traded player exception. You're gonna have enough young talent that you can end up adding a piece.
I will say I think the gap between 1 and 3 is much closer than between 3 and 4. So I think the top 3 teams
the top 3 teams to me are the true contenders, and I think that they're all really good.
So I honestly look. Summer is always the time for optimism. It's summer and training camp is like this time of unbridled optimism, and everything's gonna be great. I walked away from summer league being like, man, the Nuggets got a squad. Like I really did kind of walk away because it's like they trade for KCP, and then you're trying to process that, and the DeAndre Jordan thing happens, and then Bruce Brown, and like we look at this. If you step back and you look at the entire picture, and you're like, MPJ coming back, Jamal's playing with the summer league team, went hard apparently in the summer league practices. Like Davon is a not insubstantial addition in the mind of you and I. All of these things kind of come, like, I love how the bench looks now. I really like how the bench looks now outside of the center spot. I really like how the bench looks now. I think a lot of it is like, how I feel about Ish. That's a lot of it is like,
I don't think he's playing. I'm serious. I don't think he plays. I think he's in the Facu role now, the third point guard.
Yeah, but I think the intention was for Facu to Facu play. I think you can play.
No. He's in the final Facu role.
Yeah, but I think you can. Well, I mean, yeah, I think he's playable. I think he's like, you can put him on the floor, and so I think they can afford to get a few minutes with him.
And when everybody's healthy, I don't think he plays.
Okay, but anyway, I like the bench a lot. The starters are amazing. This team can absolutely win the Western Conference and win a title sometime in the next 5 years. So, you would have them 1?
No, I mean, I think it's fair. Honestly. Like, I would probably have them in the same spot.
Number 2 is the Los Angeles Clippers, and number 1 is the Golden State Warriors. I'm going to give the Warriors, like, it over the next 5 years does include next year, right? If this was after next year, the next 5 years, I would not have the Warriors at the top of this list. But Golden State, to me, deserves the respect of just being like, they are the literal champions. They have run the West for the last 7 years, with the exception of 2 seasons. They have everything that you need. I love their coaching, their front office. Their stars are easy to build around. They're getting older, and that's gonna be a problem. But like, they have stuff in the pipeline. They got a little worse this offseason. They're banking on Moody and Kuminga making up that difference. But if Kuminga and Moody make up that difference, they can become as good as their guys that they lost, but then you have to make up what those guys were for them last year. So like I think the Warriors are a little bit weaker than they were last year, but that still means that they are at the top of the pile.
Yeah, you do kind of feel like you have to put them there out of respect, even though if like you told me where do I put my money, I probably would put it on the Clippers or the Nuggets. So it is true. Like I kind of feel like they should win it just because they have the culture, they have the experience, they have the confidence, they've got the swagger, they've got all of those things working in them. And when we get to those top three teams, like the little details, the little margins matter. But I don't. We'll see. We'll just have to see if everything breaks. They're like Phoenix now to me in that.
Ooh.
Well, no, what I mean is that they basically had everyone healthy. They lost Gary Payton in for a while there, and I thought it was tough, and they ended up skating through, those middle rounds. But I do feel like this is the year where those margins, you get the wrong matchup when one of your guys goes down in the playoffs, and they're going to be significantly handicapped. So we'll see. I think they deserve it, but to me, it's really a three-way tie more than it is some hierarchy.
The Clippers over the Nuggets, I think, is like there's gonna be criticisms of, which I think is fair, of like you don't think the Nuggets can beat the Clippers after what we saw. I genuinely do. Like I would pick the Nuggets again. I don't think it was a bubble thing. I would still pick the Nuggets over the Clippers now. Like I like that matchup for them. I think Jokic just destroys them. I think that there's nothing they can do in that situation. But that Clippers team is so friggin' deep and so versatile. They can play now. Hartenstein's. That's what I keep trying to figure out is like how much does losing Hartenstein hurt? Because I need to look at their roster and see if they picked up somebody
against two teams.
Yeah,
Nuggets and Timberwolves.
Well, not only that, but like if they have to play small ball with Morris, I hate that.
Well, like, that's what I mean. That's why. I think it works though against most teams. Like it would work against Dallas.
Yeah, you think so? Okay. It's interesting to kind of think about how that's going to work. Like if they face, but even then, teams with center advantages, I think are going to give them, like if it's Minnesota Clippers, that would be very interesting.
So I said Minnesota, right? And then you can maybe make the case for the Lakers just because Anthony Davis draws an enormous amount of fouls. Maybe you would get a point where Zubats can't be on the court for very long, and then all of a sudden AD just dominates, Morris or something like that. But for the most part, it's Nuggets and it's Minnesota. And honestly, the funny thing is I kind of feel like we're going to see it. I kind of feel like we're going to see Nuggets Clippers next year at some point.
It'll be really interesting. Moshi says they're deep, but they've got no heart, no leadership. I disagree with that. I think that the 2020 team had no heart and no leadership. I think they evolved their roster. Paul George.
Who are the leaders now?
Paul George.
Or you're saying that the followers are better, so it's easier to lead?
Both. It's Paul George, Reggie Jackson. I think Paul George really took a leadership step. Reggie Jackson, and honestly, this is gonna make people laugh, but I think John Wall. I honestly think John Wall inspires a lot of confidence, and Ty Lue.
I was gonna say I'm gonna go the KD route and say they have a good leader in Ty Lue.
They have a good leader in Ty Lue.
Honestly, that's the difference between the bubble and now. Is they had Doc Rivers, now they have Ty Lue, and I just think that gap is big enough. And then the depth matters. The depth matters. It can complicate things. I mean, I hear that they're gonna go into camp with a battle between Reggie Jackson and John Wall. Probably not going to be something, but I don't know. That's kind of
it surprised me that they're not going to. I would think that they would play both of them and bring Batum off the bench. It surprised me that they're not going that route, but they're not going that route. So it's all surprised me that apparently Christian Wood's coming off the bench, which is insane for Dallas. But the other teams I didn't mention: Kings, no; Thunder, no; Blazers, no; Spurs, no; Jazz are now no for sure. Who would be your top three before we take a break?
Those were them. It's Denver, Clippers, Warriors.
I
honestly would put them in tiers. I would say contenders, those three. I would say like fringe contenders. People get mad, but I have the Lakers in that category. Phoenix probably in that category. Yeah. And then after that, I have spoilers. I don't think they're contenders, but spoilers. And there's a large list of spoilers, including Portland.
I will say this. I put the Pelicans on here. They finished under 500 last year, right? So it's like.
Yeah, but they were 2-15 to start the year. I just keep going back to that.
So I could, make the argument that you're right that I should take the Pelicans out. A lot of it's just like,
but they're not contenders.
Zion's so amazing, man. Like he's just, I don't know what you do with him. He's so freaking incredible.
Yeah, he brings problems too, though. Like there's going to be a little 3 steps forward, 2 steps back with him. I think. That's fair. It's still a positive. It's still a positive, but I think it's not 3.
You know what? You're right. I'm bumping him. There's only 7 contenders. Pelicans are off.
There you go.
It's Mavericks, Lakers, Suns, Memphis, Nuggets, Warriors, Clippers. That's the list. And all of this is absolutely positive, and there will be no changes between now and next year. There's no question I'm going to be absolutely right on this. Let's take a break. We'll come back, and we'll talk about Adam Silver's press conference. We'll get into what we've seen at Summer League from some of the other teams, and all that and more when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I need to tell you about BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. I've been digging into football. I like the Eagles a lot this year, Adam. I like the Eagles, and I'm going to be betting on the Lions. Go Lions! That's a very me thing to do, is to be like, this is the year. And my wife's going to be like, you didn't bet on the Lions again, did you? I absolutely did. BetOnline's your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. They remain the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. They're the fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports like MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making us part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can join the show and join folks like Zamora, who's in, as always, Charles, who's talking about the Mavericks are not contenders, Stefan, who doesn't get the Wembanyama hype because he's unplayable in serious games in Europe, because that's the same thing, and Leo, who says the Mavs are a contender for the first round. Love the animosity. I love how much the West teams dislike each other. It's really fun. There's just a lot of animosity in the West, and it's pretty great. Adam Silver held a press conference yesterday at the Board of Governors meeting. That's when the owners get together and decide what they're going to do for the next year, conduct all their business.
When the governors get together, it's not owners.
Yes.
They're not owners, Matt.
Yes, the governors.
It's not the owners meeting.
It's not the Board of Owners meeting. It's the Board of Governors meeting when the governors get together. And so he has a press conference every year after. They talked about a lot of things. First off, the play-in is permanent. What do you think about that?
Here's my number one take on it. And this is more true of online culture, and it includes online NBA culture. Everybody is a cynic. And I hate it. It's actually my least favorite trait about the world in 2022. There's a lot of terrible things, but people just always go to cynicism. And this is a perfect example. Do I love it? I think it's weird. I don't totally get it. Am I open to seeing it? Sure. Let's see if it works. I think everybody's defaulting to this is dumb. Nobody's going to try it. Nobody's going to do this. I don't know. I'm optimistic that it's going to end up being a cool thing that maybe helps the regular season, which desperately needs some help.
I was referring to the play-in tournament, not the mid-season tournament, which has not been confirmed.
I thought the play-in tournament is for sure go. The mid-season tournament though was, I thought, the headline of it, that they early as 2024 would implement this new mid-season tournament.
Can I ask you if you've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, the movie?
I have not.
Okay, you as a film buff, that's an important film for you to see.
Important.
Yeah, I think it's important. Honestly, it's a beautifully made film, and there's a line in it that says, essentially, this is not the exact line, but it says that my optimism is my strategy. It's a strategic move, and I think that you'll really resonate with that. You'll like that. So I kind of agree with it. I think that there's a certain value to optimism as that. I love the midseason tournament idea, and I'm biased because, one, I like weird ideas, and two, I work in the gambling space, and this is like a godsend for us. Games that quote unquote matter in the middle. I will say this. Here's my thing. The biggest criticism of the midseason tournament has been the players won't care. My only rebuttal to that is, if you give them stakes, the competitive spirit in players usually comes out. Even if the stakes are low, the competitive spirit comes out. The problem is that with 82 games, a game in Orlando on a Tuesday in January effectively has 0 stakes. It is impossible to feel like it has 0 stakes. But if you put them in a tournament and there's some hype around it and it's a one game, you lose and you're out, I genuinely think that some players at least will respond. I think Damian Lillard would be like, I'm not losing. Screw this. There's a show I really like called Shoresy where he's like, this team will never lose again. That's how I feel like a lot of these guys would be in that environment. I think it'd be great for teams that are in the middle, that are playing well at the time, to be like, let's make a run. Let's see if we can do this. And then if we don't make the playoffs, whatever. But it's a building block. I really am excited for the idea. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's fine if the stars don't play. I'm fine if we have whatever. I just want to see it. I'm with you on that. What do you think about the take foul change?
What is the rule?
So here's what they're going to do for the take foul outside of the last 2 minutes. If you commit a take foul, it's 1 free throw and you retain possession of the ball.
Is it a judgment call?
Yes.
Perfect. This has been my whole thing is people act like you put it in the hands of the referee. And I just say the referees have so many judgment calls in the course of a game and we just accept it. Like a block charge is a judgment call. So I like it. Yeah, make it a judgment call. Perfect. Get those out of the game. You know what that means next year, Matt? Honest to God, you know what that means? It's going to be the greatest season of highlights that we've had in a decade. I mean this sincerely. Think about how many times Zion Williams gets on a fast break and somebody just wraps him up. And it's like, what was he going to do there? Was he going to windmill? Was he going to 360? Was he going to 360 windmill? Now we get to see it.
It's going to be great. Absolutely.
And the pace of the game, Jonathan. That's a good point, too. The pace of the game.
I am very charged up that they made this change. It is absolutely terrific. Only other thing I would kind of talk about is Silver's comments on players. So we've had Ben Simmons on a long-term contract, demand not to play, demand to be traded. We have Kevin Durant in the middle of a 4-year deal, ask out. We've seen James Harden on a long-term extension, ask out. This has been coming for some time. There's been rumblings about it. The owners are unhappy. They don't want to sign these guys to contracts and have them ask out after 2 years. Richard Jefferson tweets yesterday about how it's a contract. You know, who are the people that say it's a contract when Donovan Mitchell gets traded? My response to Jefferson would be this: if you want a two-way trade accessibility, you as a union need to negotiate for that. That's my problem. Is that if you negotiate into the CBA that players can ask for a trade, there's a mechanism. I'm not going to complain about it because I'm like, the owners agreed to it. The owners agreed to this contract stipulation. This is how contracts work. My problem is that that's not allowed. You sign a contract and you know that the team can trade you, right? You know that a team can trade you. That's part of the, but you'll take the money because it's $200 million and I don't care where I play for $200 million. But then after you sign that deal, then you're like, I want to change the terms of it. I want to play somewhere else. Right. Like when you sign that contract, you accept that the owners can trade your contract.
Do you think they could ever make it? Because I know he said that they want to address it and they're exploring options. Do you think it would make sense? Forget about whether they could pull it off if like the Players Association would agree to this. But do you think you could ever trade it or make it so that if you sign a 5-year max deal or extension or anything that gives you 5 years at a maximum amount, that the first 3 years are no trade, basically effectively no trade, meaning both sides just can't. They can't trade you. You can't be traded, so you can't demand to be traded. Is there any way to just say, like, if you don't want that flexibility, don't take a max? If you do want, if you want the max, then just know you're not going to be able to hamstring a team 1 year later.
Yeah, I think the stipulation there is that the players are going to want. The players are going to want some sort of stipulation that the team can't do it for the first 3 years of that deal either.
That's what I'm saying. It's a two-way,
right.
Like they literally can't be traded.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Maybe it's 2 years instead of 3 or something. But I don't want you to get to a point where you could sign a max extension and then 4 months later be like, hey, I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if this happens with Bradley Beal. I'm not saying it's going to, but
everyone's expecting it. Everyone's expecting it. Everyone. Yeah. Like, everyone around the league.
I want to build. I want the contract. Oh, we got it? I kind of want out of here. I'm not a contender. There's nothing worse for a team. I don't know how you make this league honest when that's kind of how it works.
So I think probably the way to do it would be a year left, right? So you have to deal with the and one of the things that would be
tough. That would be tough.
Why?
You want trades to be able to build teams. I think what you don't want is immediate trades. So like that's why I said it could be for 1 year, it could be for 2 years. Like if you sign a max extension, to me. But at some point, a team has to be like, hey, we loved this guy. We committed to him. We did it honestly. We're 2 years into this, and we realize our team needs something different. Like, to me, the trades still need to be able to happen. I just don't want them to I want it to be honest.
I also think the NBA will probably push back on it because they're like, we don't want less trades. We dominate news cycles with this. Like, this is good for us, right?
You know what? I disagree. Here's the one thing, though, because you're unquestionably right that trades are what drive interest. But I do think it's a short-term way of looking at it. They drive and they short-term, but like we're slowly descending, and that's giving us this little bump. I think it might reverse that trend where you actually get fewer eyeballs in July but actually more eyeballs spread over the year.
So one of the reasons I would kind of lean towards the last year for you have to have like basically like let's say 18 months remaining on the contract, right? One of the reasons that I actually think that this would be good is because it would effectively stabilize the market, where it's like a number of guys aren't available, because it used to be that way where it was just like, oh, they're definitely not going to trade that guy, and players didn't try and ask out because it wasn't the player empowerment era. But if it's like you can't ask out until 18 months out, you can't exercise this request or whatever, and you can't trade them, then it's like, okay, like, hey, we're going to have this guy until this date. So until that date, we need to plan around it. And then it also stabilizes it, because one of the issues that we're having right now is the Rudy Gobert trade to Minnesota, where I'm gonna move on. But Minnesota, I will just say, like, for like that pick amount that Minnesota traded has frozen a lot of those conversations, right? The KD thing is this perfect example where it's like, how do you possibly put together a KD offer relative to the market when Rudy Gobert goes for 4 picks and 2 swaps? How do you? Kevin Durant would be worth 8 picks and 4 swaps, and you can't put that together within the framework of the CBA. Now, I do think to some degree you just kind of have to be like, look, this was an outlier deal. It was worth it to Minnesota. Other teams are in different places, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it does complicate those issues. If you had it to where it was 18 months out, I think it's like, look, we can't trade that. We can't get that much for him because it's only a year and a half of his contract remaining. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Kevin Durant with 18 months remaining on his contract is entirely different than 4 years of Kevin Durant.
Right. So true.
So
that's so true.
None
of this will get agreed to. None of that will change. And honestly, here's the thing. I think here's my honest belief, and this is a belief about just the way the world works, is that no matter what rule you put in place, people are going to find the weakness in the rule and exploit it. And it might take a year or two, but I feel like the NBA has gotten quicker at figuring these things out just because of who they're employing now, like in front offices. And so all of this stuff I still think you have to try. You have to try to make things work, but just know that whatever you put in place, somebody is going to. So, for example,
are you muted?
Like teams know, like,
there you go. You muted. Your mic died. You're back now, though. I can hear you.
Oh. People, it might just be one of those things where, like, in restricted free agency, teams know you're even more able of screwing a team.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, was there anybody else on any of the other teams that really impressed you from Summer League?
They're saying they can't hear me, so maybe we'll get to that tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll do that tomorrow. We'll wrap up today, and tomorrow we'll get to some of the Summer League conversations, as well as we'll recap Game 3 of the Nuggets Summer League adventure. We'll do that tomorrow on Locked On Nuggets. Make sure to follow the YouTube channel. Really appreciate you guys joining us. We'll see you guys again tomorrow on Locked On.